be accessibility.
Okay. For you, just for you.
Somebody has put a copy.
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that just a copy of what I already have?
Yes, it is.
Are all the players here that we anticipate will be here? Okay. This is kind of an interesting thing. Let me introduce myself for a moment. My name is Judy Lieber, and I've been asked to act as hearing officer to hear the request for variance that has come down. And so that you know why I've been chosen, you know, you'll probably have to ask Mr. Winder, but I can tell you what I've done in the past that gives me a little experience, I think, to bring to the table. I was an assistant city attorney for Salt Lake City for a long time ago, but for about 10 years, which seemed like for a long time, during which I did the planning and zoning and the building construction and the development things that were kind of going on. That was my bailiwick in Salt Lake City. And did that, and so have been familiar with historical districts, with you know, design requirements and with building codes, and had to train Board of Adjustments and those kinds of things. So do I have an interest, you know, in this particular situation? Absolutely not. I'm neutral. I don't even live in Utah County, you know, and for some people I know that that's probably, you know, everybody should live in Utah County, but
We had enough.
no, not everybody. It just seems like everybody already is moving there. I live in Salt Lake County and coming down, so I've been asked to do this and to act as the hearing officer, so that you know in exactly what we're doing. I think we're on the record. Is that correct, Jody?
Yes, we are.
Okay, we're on the correct, so it's being recorded. There will be a record of it, although I don't think it will be transcribed unless it's requested. My understanding of what will go on is, as I will conduct this hearing, the hearing is the opportunity for the appellants or the applicants, which are Mr. and Mrs. Jones, to explain why they think their application for their approval of their building permit that does not at this point comply with the literal enforcement of the ordinances is appropriate and should be granted. I have read it. I have read through it. I have looked at your plans as long as PDFs could be looked at from something that was a blueprint size. So I will have some questions about that. But, so I've done that. I have driven for the last hour around your city, up and down and over in the new area where there's construction farther to the west and over to the farther to the east, and your flatter ground, and I'm not sure where that difference between Salem and Woodland Hills starts, but I've driven it. And I actually am glad that Mr. Jones was here when I came about 20 minutes ago, because I went to see the property in issue, and I put it in the wrong place. So he corrected that, and I went on my own to see and have actually walked that property over on Oak Street. So you now have the information of what I have, and certainly that is above board. How I would like to go forward on this meeting is that at this point in time, well, first of all, I want to explain to those of you who have not worked with the hearing officer before. It's kind of a new game in town, and your city is just going to it. Because a lot of times these decisions have generally been made by a planning, usually a board of adjustment if it involved variance, or if an interpretation was required, it may have been a planning commission. Kind of those two entities who are generally speaking citizen volunteers do the review. And it's my understanding here that in this case the applicant is contesting the analysis of the literal enforcement to the proposed building plans. Adopting ordinances is a legislative function. Okay, I'm not here to be a legislator. Your city council is your legislator. There's the one that adopt the ordinances. It is not my job, nor within my power as a hearing examiner to ignore those, or to say, well, it doesn't matter. It does. I'm not the legislative body. I'm in a quasi-judicial position to see whether or not the application, in this case, fits a criteria that's statutory to allow a variance as requested. There are specific findings that I have to make, and I think those are laid out in the applicant, and I probably will go through them again. I have to find whether or not the literal enforcement would cause an unreasonable hardship that is not necessary to carry out the general purpose. The hardship, it cannot be self-imposed or economic. It has to come from circumstances that are related to the property itself, that are not shared generally by other properties in the area. And the external or the literal enforcement would deny some right or access that is generally allowed or exercised, the ability to be exercised by other people who have similar circumstances, if they have similar circumstances. And that the effect will not be contrary to the general plan that's been adopted by the legislative body, and that that impacts a substantial property interest. So those are the kind of findings by statute I will have to make in rendering the decision. So I don't have just that, this is the way out, that push the button, I don't have to comply. That's not what's involved with the hearing officer. And so I'm here balancing the city's interest in protecting and enforcing their ordinances with the application on the ground. If there's, for some reason, there's a difference of opinion about how that goes. So that's my job, and some people don't understand that, and some people wish that it were different. Sometimes I might wish that it were different, but that's my statutory responsibility as a hearing officer, and I just want that to be, so, out on the open so that everyone understands that. And so what I'd like to do of how to proceed generally from this point on is I would like each of you to make your appearances on the record. Stand and indicate your name and why you're here, or in what function you're here. Then what I thought it would make sense to do is to, and then I'm going to ask the applicant to come up here, and if you're counsel for the city, is Mr. Smith, is that right?
Correct.
You will be here, and the applicant probably on this side. And so I will ask that when we proceed into the discussion, that if you're referring to a particular document in the application or the packet, that you tell me we're working on, going to exhibit such and such, so that we all know that we're working on the same document, and that document can be referenced so that if somebody reading this transcript will know what document we're looking at. That's not, most of the drawings that are in there, the architectural drawings, have page numbers, or we'll give them one. So the order that you have them might be the different, because I had to download them and print them out, and they may be in a different order in mine. So we just need to make sure that we're talking about the same document and identify it for the purposes of the transcript. I would like to proceed then with the applicant making your pitch, whoever that will be, your pitch, I shouldn't say that, that sounds pejorative, I don't mean that. Your response and your request of what you're requesting and why. Then I'm going to ask the city to respond and to go through their analysis of what literal enforcement will do and compare that to the proposal. And to prepare that in terms of what they perceive as being the general objectives of the general plan of I think it's going to focus around the height requirement of doing that. And then we may have discussion going back and forth at that point in time. Whether that discussion is going with Mr. Smith and Mr. Corbett, you can kind of decide which of you are going to be doing what, or if you're both going to participate in that analysis, or who's going to do that, or your argument why or why not you recommend or don't recommend that the special consideration is appropriate in this particular case. At that point, there may be discussion, and we'll take it to that point. It may be that I'll be able to make a decision today. I may have to take it under advisement, or we'll take it to that point and see where we go. I would like to, on the record, explain a little bit of my observations of the city that I think that are influential in whatever decision I will arrive after having driven through your roads. First of all, it's a lovely city. It's quaint, it is intimate, although it certainly is sophisticated. You don't have some of the things of curbs and gutters and all the places and sidewalks that some places people have, but you have beautiful vistas, and you have great shrub oak, and you have not a streetscape, but a canopy that appears to be about 25 feet high in terms of covering, as I've been driving by, buildings that are one level above grade and a roof tend to not be visible from the road. Ones that are taller than that start poking out of the canopy. So that there's and that seems to be consistent. It also seems to be consistent that roads, in this case, are along ridges. And so having slopes that you have to deal with is a common, it's probably a marketing tool. It's probably done intentionally because you get the benefit of the walkout basement to the sides, which creates the height question that we're tackling with. So those are my kind of feelings coming in. You do have that canopy that provides some privacy to your homes, but it also makes things that stick above that canopy more obvious. I wish I could get to the opposite, the advantage on the other side, to look back at those to see what those were, but in my driving I rarely could find that, so I was trying to drive to the outside edge and look back and see what I could for what that downhill, that downslope facade looked like. So I think you've got a little jewel here, and I can understand why, and I can understand why those ordinances are put in place to preserve that. And with that, understanding from where I'm coming from as my observations of your general community, first of all, I want to compliment you on it. You have great potential and great development at this point, and looks like you may have lots of room to expand. I don't know how far your city limits go, but so good luck on your endeavors as we'll go forward. So at this point, let's have everyone individually, if you will make your notice of your name, your address, and your purpose here today, and then those who will be joining us up, then come up and we'll get started. Okay? Does that make sense? Wherever we want to. Mr. Smith, why don't you go forward?
I can go ahead. My name is Ethan Smith. I'm an assistant city attorney for the city of Woodland Hills, just here representing the city.
Okay, are you going to come and join us
Yeah.
up there? Okay.
I'm Steve Johns, property owner of 610 South Oak Drive in Woodland Hills.
And I'm Brandy Johns, same address. Do you need our actual address or?
You're the owner, but you're not living there, correct?
Right.
Under construction. Hey, the rest of you.
I'm Wayne Franson, I'm with the City Planning Commission, I'm just kind of here observing today.
I'm Mark Solomon, I'm a property owner across the street from the Johns, and I just wanted to say my piece if there's an opportunity.
There will be an opportunity if I know somebody who's one. And I'm sorry, it was Mark?
Solomon,
Solomon.
S-O-V as in Victor, I-N-E.
Brent Winder, mayor, just also here to observe.
then I'm Jody Stones, I'm the city recorder.
And Jody will be taking care of the logistics of the recording today. Okay, let's get started, and so we'll turn at this time over to Mr. Johns.
Okay, actually Randy's more the,
Yeah,
Which,
so,
take your best.
full presenter, yeah.
so basically the reason that we're here is, when we designed our home, we were initially gonna do a 2-story home on the property, and then we realized we went to the lot, we took into account all the neighbors, the existing properties, and before we even knew about this ordinance for the height, because I guess this is a newer ordinance for the city, we decided to drop it down to a rambler, just to make sure that we were preserving the views in the area, so we kind of were already taking that into account. So one interesting thing about our lot, there's a few interesting things, but one that's very unique is it has a lot of interesting slope all over the place. So from the street, it instantly starts to drop down into a ravine, and then it goes back up to street level.
Okay, I'd like you to look at your grading plan on your exhibit.
Yeah.
That probably would be the most helpful for us to, unless you have something else, but I'm assuming it's correct.
That's what I'm talking about, yeah, so if you guys want to just pull that up. So, if our lot were to be flat, obviously we wouldn't have any of these height issues. We would be able to build the rambler ranch style home no problem. So, with it,
Mrs. Jones, I'm having a hard time finding it.
that's
So,
one sec, Jody's reading it up.
okay, so we're talking about, now you're referring to this one, it's.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, it's sheet of 1 of 3.
Yeah.
Yeah,
On the
so-
grading plan over there, so 1 of 3, so we're gonna call that just exhibit 1 for today, so
Okay.
that we have it.
So do you care if I just point on that?
No, I think that would be
Okay.
helpful.
Okay, great, so, I don't know where it's down, but, so this is the street, and then down here, it drops down very low, and then again up here, it climbs back up, so this elevation and this elevation are similar. So it's kind of down then back up.
So we're gonna do.
It dips down into a ravine and then back up. So with the setback, for the front setback, we've set the house back 50 feet, which is in accordance with that. By doing so, it already drops our first floor, so our main floor of the home, the above grade, to 11 feet below the street. So we're already down lower
At the south end.
at the south end right here.
Okay, now, just while we're on this, so I'm taking it the north end is, this the north?
This is north,
Okay,
this is south. So this is like where our front door's at, so I'm
Okay.
kind of referring to that. So, we've tried different things. We've tried, maybe we can push the house down more, but I don't know if when you have all driven around, there's, sandbags all over the place. So there's a lot of flooding from what we're hearing up here. And so, we're very concerned already about having flooding issues because we had to drop down 11 feet. So dropping down anymore, we're just worried that it's gonna drop our house down. You've got this low area here, and it's gonna become a flooding issue, which is gonna be a safety hazard in many ways. So we don't wanna drop it down any more than what we have to. So that's one of the major concerns. Another concern that we have is that we do need wheelchair accessibility to our home. So the way that we've got it designed right now, we are able to have a flat driveway to be able to get that wheelchair down. But if we drop it down more, our ADA accessibility becomes a major problem with slope on the driveway.
now, is that a requirement from, is that a building code requirement?
It's
or
just
is
us,
that-
we have an issue at Family Member that we have an issue with, that we need to have ADA, accessibility to the home. So that's another concern. So a couple of things, I mean, if we're with the water already just seeing, when we come up here and we see the water issues and people just have flooding all over, we're just very concerned that the more that we drop our house down and then we're deeper into this ravine, what kind of issues are we gonna have? So one of the things in my mind that makes our property unique to everybody else's property, around us at least, like Mark across the street, it's more just, they're more flat. And so they don't have as much of this, like, just strange dip down and then back up. And because of the new height requirements that have been set into place, it does make a difference. So what we're asking is that we can just go off the grade that our home is built up to. And really, it's not gonna change the front elevation or look at the house or the way that it blocks anything from the front. If you can go to, what's that paper where you drew the lines?
Yeah, so that would be the elevation exhibit with the cross
I think it's
sections.
right here. Right looking at it. Yeah,
This one,
that's it. So what would that be called?
Detailed, it says detailed narrative of request, so I'm gonna make that exhibit 2.
Yeah, that's it.
Jody, can you put that one up? Jody?
Yes, I'm looking,
Oh,
see if I can find it.
You know, so it would be, sorry,
It's probably in the, yeah.
yeah, let me tell you what the name is on that page.
It says detailed narrative of request.
610 South Oak, yeah, it's,
No, we're still agreeing. One that looks kind of like this. No, it wasn't part of these line items.
so it's titled, 610 South Oak Drive Variance Request Narrative. Sorry, I guess I should have done all these in one big file, huh?
No, that's fine.
Look at it. And Jody, I'm just marking the numbers right here on,
That one, yeah, that's the Word document.
That's it. Okay, perfect. So maybe can you go up just a little bit more? Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so this is the front of our house, and this is the back of our house. So this blue line is the natural grade reference point that the city's using to calculate the building height. And then we are gonna be building up the property, I believe 6 feet, 5 feet or 6 feet, roughly, to try to get it a little bit more flat so that we're not as worried about drainage issues and all of that kind of stuff, just to try to have a better runoff. So, we would be building it up to this green line.
so, okay.
So,
Let me ask a question.
yeah,
As I understand it, the part to the left that's dotted in there is the fill that you will be taking out, is that correct? You're gonna take everything above the green line out.
So right now, our natural grade is the blue line, yes. So blue line is where it sits right now, so when you go out there, that's what it is. What our anticipation is we would actually bring in a little bit of fill to bring this up a little bit.
You're bringing it up to the 5662.
Yes, correct.
So everything above the blue line up to 5662 is,
66
66. Yeah, I mean, to that, to the dotted line,
Correct.
where you're bringing it up, that will all be fill, and everything that's in the dotted space there will be removed. This will be open and walk out from that lower level.
Correct, so, exactly.
So this, okay, do you have, I'm sorry, these, as you can tell, I marked mine up a whole lot. Question I have, the grade from that, looks like your foundation line, where it comes out, to the top of the roof is how tall?
So, from here to here,
No, from the top, yeah, that horizontal,
point?
that horizontal shape, down to,
Down to this grade
no,
here,
down to what will be exposed,
down here.
correct?
So it is, I'll have to do that calculation.
We'll do it from this side then, so are they tens or they,
this is, yeah, 10, and then
then
what's
it's
this?
17? Is that, I couldn't read that number.
So, sorry, I'll have to.
She's
get-
wondering how tall that section of the house is.
Well, I wanna know how
Sorry,
tall
this one
all the
right here.
sections of the house are.
So top here, I think I would just need to do a scale on it, so.
Okay, can you read that number or what that is, or is
This
that
one right
something-
here?
Yeah, or is that not, is that some?
I think it says 13.1, 13.1. It's just kind of blurry though.
Let me see.
See if I can zoom it.
See, oh, okay, no, you got it from here then, so if this is your elevation of 62, 66, and that one's 96, that's,
Oh, yeah.
so that's 30 feet
Yeah,
there.
so we got 35 feet from here to here.
Okay, so
And
that's.
then I think we've got another 4 or 5 feet here, which,
So looking at this, the front of the house is not really the issue, it's the back of the house. So the other interesting thing about our lot is from the south to the north, it slopes another 18 feet down. So that's where we're running into the majority of the issue, is down on that north end, where it has started up higher and sloped down.
Well, and that's why you're bringing that in from below anyway, on your grading plan, on that exhibit wood, right?
Mhm.
So by taking, so this section of the house above in the trusses of the garage is our ADU unit for our family member who needs to live with us.
But not in that portion of the garage, it's over in the other part.
It's over the middle, like right back in there.
Is that correct? It's my understanding.
It's above the two-car garage.
So this shed roof represents the roof overhang for that ADU unit,
Which is
so.
this down
So you're
there.
exactly right, Judy, that it's past that main
Yeah,
garage
it's,
portion.
it's. Sorry, I was looking.
No, you're good. There's a lot of papers.
So I'm looking now at, sheet number A00 in the line drawings, and I'm gonna mark it as 3, which shows the front facade. So my understanding of looking at that, if we can get to that line, to the, no, it's on the line drawings, it's on the line drawings. Well, we can,
Is
okay,
it the,
yeah,
the
it's
tab right next to it?
This one?
Yeah, that would be the,
probably the first page of that.
correct, yeah.
There we go.
Okay, so as I understand it,
That's the ADU.
that's the ADU, and if that's set back, that the facade is farther back from the road, then, I mean, it's not
Yes.
it's not just a straight facade, it integrates in and out.
Yes, that's correct. So if you scroll down to the next couple of pages there, up one
Oh,
there,
the
and then,
different- Okay, so this is,
then you'll see what Judy's talking about there.
so 3 is the front facade, and 4 is the floor plan. Now, this floor plan, when it says bedroom number 2 in the garage, as I understand it, that is actually not where you walk in.
So
This is the
scrolling
basement.
down.
This is
Yes.
the basement, okay,
So
so that's,
I think
This is the main floor, and then this is the ADU.
okay, so what you're talking about, the one that's noted A1-2,
That's
is
this one.
that, okay, that is the floor plan, I'm gonna mark it as 4. That's the floor plan, and that is the ground, the entrance level, we'll call it that, since,
Mhm.
or the main level, because there were some confusing numbers. And so as I understand it, this insert of the upper floor plan fixed directly down into the portion, above, the stairs match up, and it goes over the garage, and then you've got a carport, I mean, some kind of a overhang or a covered deck
Mhm.
that overhangs.
Right.
Correct, yeah.
So, is there a need for that height to be that height?
For which part to be that high?
For the,
The garage,
no, for the garage that does not have the ADU?
this one?
It is designed to be an RV garage, so it does have a taller roof line. Now, what we could do on the back is hip that roof a little bit, along the back, but even with the requirements, a standard hip would not work with it. And that's why we've opted to say it fits our needs. So if we go back to the elevation sheet there.
Is that the elevation one you want?
I think it's
Um,
that one.
So,
Or
no,
it's the
it's,
front facade, is that the one you're
I think
talking
it's
about?
this one there, or it's the Word document, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so what you're referencing is, does this massive roof need to be so big? Well, we had talked about being able to do a hip on this thing, but again, as you see with the natural grade point, we'd have to hip it. It's what's called a bastard hip. And it just really makes this forehead look really big with the back looking bad, which we'd be open to doing, but it still brought down our ADU roof too much to even have that space. So we're really fighting two different issues there.
So one of the biggest things with our lot is there's nobody behind us. So we go clear back the 2.5 acres, and there's not any houses that will ever be built behind ours, so we've paid special attention. I mean, obviously, there's a house like up on the hill, but it's like a blue house.
Isn't there another street that their backyard would look at your backyards?
That's down in a deeper ditch, so.
That dirt road you're talking about?
I'm just saying is, as I was trying and I didn't have the time to go after I found Oak to try to find the road that's on the other side of it. Is that often there are, on the ridges, you have a look at, but your view would be across at the back sides of the houses on the opposite, on the next ridge.
So ours goes back up and then it drops even more significantly down, and there's a dirt road back there.
Okay, but there's houses over on this side then.
So
And
there are,
houses,
yes.
those houses on that ridge would have views of your property.
I don't think they would.
So
It's
I
kind of weird.
believe that these ones here can look down into there, yes.
Okay, what is the name of that street?
This one is Oak and this one's Lakeview.
Like,
And I'll just, for sake of the record, this is my home right here. So,
which one? Oh, where you're showing me.
right, so I just, for the record,
And you do have a view of our lot, cause I think we could see yours.
yeah.
At least from
And
the
there
street.
is a proposed preliminary plat for a subdivision back in here.
Back in, down in the hole?
Click on,
But wouldn't those homes be down so low in that ravine that they wouldn't even be up to our elevation, correct?
It may not be up to your elevation, you'll have a view up the hill. Is that correct,
Corbett?
Corbett?
say it again.
If there's any green area that's marked as a proposed subdivision, that they will have views up the hill.
Oh, yeah, they're down the bottom,
But would they see our home from where they're at?
not likely, because there's a ridge in between the two.
Yeah,
Where-
there's.
So right
there's
along
a
that red
ridge.
line, the west border of that piece that's highlighted, there's a ridge.
So you own to the top of the ridge?
Yes.
And the
Click on
lot-
the John's property again. Yeah, so the back of that property, there's a ridge that goes that separates those two valleys, those two gullies.
Is that ridge? Okay, and then you're saying the proposed development is down in the valley? Will the houses be up on the hill?
No, they can't be, they're setback, their setback requirement would require them to be down the hill further from that east red property line, that red line on the property.
To be down in towards the valley, but they will, so will they be designed that their views are focused? Well, I guess you can't know whether it's down or up.
Well, but they're downhill.
I understand that, but you can have a big picture going out the back, up the hill.
Their backyard would just be like a big straight up hill.
Okay, so they would not have a view perspective over above that ridge?
I don't think so. Not to the extent that they would be able to see the house.
And they won't be building up on the ridge?
They can't.
Okay.
They can't because the ridge is the back property line. And so they have to be at least 30 feet off that rear property line for the rear setback.
Okay, but if you go off 30 feet and you go up 35 feet,
But you're going down.
So yeah, as they come in 30
If you
feet.
go off 30 feet, you're going downhill further before you can come back up to the house.
okay.
And if you actually walk it, you can see, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's a pretty dramatic decline.
And the property lines on what I'm assuming is the east side of the road of Oak, all go to that ridge line?
No, they don't all go as deep as this one.
Okay, the existing homes that are there, to
Above.
the,
These ones?
above,
To the north,
to the north,
yeah, right there.
do their property lines go to that similar ridge line?
Yes.
Okay,
Click on Gaylord Karen,
This is Gaylord's,
or click on the next one. Yeah, that one.
Carson's.
Okay, yeah, so their property line goes all the way back to that ridge, just like the Johns' property line. And it's not until you get to the other side, back behind Gaylord, Karen, click on Gaylord and who's the one above him?
Vincent's,
Vincent?
so that's Vincent's, that is Gaylord, and I don't know what that is.
That's just, I mean, that's just where his property line goes
So
down.
is that ridge from lots that are down on Popular Street?
Right, right up there.
Oh, there's
So,
it.
so you got a gully that comes in right here. It starts, this gully starts up in here, and that's
On the
where,
Johns.
that's where the Johns are coming down and then back up. So this is the high point. That gully starts up here and ends up down here where it crosses into the road. And then there's another gully right here that goes up this way. This is a ridge that comes in between these two gullies. So where all these trees are down here at the bottom, that's the bottom of the gully.
That's
So
where the
the-
new subdivision will be.
Yeah, all of this property right here. So in order for these houses to build, they're going downhill to the setback line before they can even get the back of the house.
That'll be the back of their building pad.
Right.
So it's very unlikely we would even see their roof lines.
Or they yours.
I don't think we would see them, I don't think they would see us. We've walked it, it's really hard to walk because it's just a bunch of shrub oak, but it's a really steep decline.
I saw that.
Yeah, and so,
And that's down to the dip, and you say it comes up on the other side. I didn't want that part of it.
yeah, it's pretty rugged back there, so I don't think we would see any of those houses.
Just for information, Mr. Sabine, can you point out Mr. Sabine's home?
He's across the
He's
street.
across the street there.
One more, the circle driveway. The circular driveway, the next one down.
That one right there.
And you're
Directly across the street.
and you are down in as well, and your property view is to the east, is that correct, or west?
Their property will be, yeah, pretty much straight east of where I'm at across the street.
When you go back to this site plan, exhibit one, the front door, their front door is 11 feet lower than the road.
Our front door,
Yeah.
yeah.
On the facade. So if you were drawing on the line on exhibit one, you'd be almost halfway up that story,
Yeah, they're only,
11 feet.
your 10-foot ceilings, main floor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
so it'd be above, it'd be about to where the eave, that lowest eave
So
is.
the view will, vary is not the right word, but what do you call it when you put it down? Offset it or,
Sunk.
sink, yeah, so you've sunk it 11.
HW Bill Crawler.
I'm sorry, excuse me. That's probably a good reminder for everyone to turn off your phones.
So before, like before, when you're talking about canopy, so you're already, that driveway is already 11 feet lower than the road. And then if you take any trees, I don't know if there's any trees between the house and the road,
There's a bunch, yeah.
but if there's any trees left between the house and the road, and those trees are 10 feet tall or 20 to 25 feet tall, I think Mark would probably be hard pressed to see down through the trees to see that.
Especially with his 30-foot pine trees between us and them.
Yeah.
But
And-
the issue to me isn't the fact that the front of the house is gonna be too tall. It's the fact that the way that our code reads, because our code creates a reference line that takes the lowest natural point and the highest natural point, or the lowest finished grade and the highest finished grade, whichever is lower in every case. Well, when you're dropping off at 28% slope, that lowest natural point at the back of the house is what's killing it.
Okay, let's go to that slide, the narrative one. If we
The
can,
Word
Jody,
document,
because I think
Jody.
that's what I'd like, Corbett to go on and to show.
Do you want me to sit down?
Yes. if you
Okay.
don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So what I'm saying, the issue comes from
Is this the line that is used?
The blue line is the natural grade reference line.
Right. Well, and that's the issue with the code, because the code says you use the lowest in each case, in every case. So you create this reference line from existing grades, you create the dotted, where's the dotted the dotted reference line, which is finished grades, or is it the green line, which is finished grades, depending on where you take that finished grade at the perimeter of the structure. And then the corresponding line that's 35 feet above that reference line, whichever one it is. And if this is the variance that's being sought after, is this little bit right here, or if this is the variance from this point to this point. If this is the reference line, this being the roof of the second story, or the roof of the ADU, makes the ADU tough.
Yeah,
If this is the corresponding line, then this little bit of roof right here could easily be dealt with. But if you're trying to get this roof line and this roof line for the ADU down to this point, that makes it really tough to get an ADU out of that.
what if they bring that two-car garage forward?
You can't, because of the building setback line.
You've got another one that's forward.
Well, but if you try to bring this garage forward, it makes this garage inaccessible. I mean, it takes this 16-foot door down to a 10-foot door instead of being a two-car garage, a single-car garage, which,
Can you reverse it?
The house is on the other side.
No, I'm just saying is that you're telling me, from looking at this part, is that if you take the interpretation that, as I understand it, is your general interpretation, is that the lowest natural grade line is the marker.
well, Wayne would probably be the best one to answer that.
Well, you're the
But,
plan examiner, so,
He does site plans.
okay.
I do building plans.
Okay, then, so what is the blue, is there, okay, you've got a blue and a green line, and you're saying if you take this one or if you take that one, which is the one that which does your ordinance require you take?
Both.
Whichever the lowest is, between the natural reference line or the finished grade reference line. The measurement is down to that line.
So in this case, is there any doubt that it would take it to the blue line?
If the blue line is the lowest reference line, then that's where it would go to.
Is there any doubt, is there any fact distinguishing that in this particular application, the blue line is the line that the ordinance would require?
The ordinance requires both. So you take the lowest in every case. So if this dotted line right here is the proposed finished grade, then that finished grade is right here, which makes it lower than the blue line. So where these lines cross at that point right
The
there,
intersection.
you no longer use the native grade because the finished grade is lower.
So if I'm drawing on my copy of this thing, you take the blue line and you follow it up to where it intersects with the
Dotted line,
dotted line at that right about there.
right, yeah.
And then it goes, shifts up to that one.
Well, that shifts down to this finished grade reference line.
Okay, it shifts to this one.
So at this point
But I
right
wrote
here,
it correctly, Mr. Court. Is that Mr. Court or is that Court your first name?
Carl was my first one, I'll answer to either.
So we're coming up from along the blue line
At that
to
point,
that point, and then we take the dotted line, the finish line.
right. No, yeah, the dotted line, because the dotted line is the finished grade reference line.
At that point, it's the lowest.
And that, yeah, and so that corresponding parallel line for the building height transfers right there.
And at
And so-
that point, the building is below it, is below
Right,
the
oh, yeah.
35.
Oh, yeah, it's below all of them, obviously. But right here is where it transfers from the finished grade, from the existing grade reference line, which is the blue, to the finished grade reference line, which is the dotted black line.
So that's what you have used for the literal enforcement of all of the houses that are out there.
Since this code was enacted,
And
yes.
when was that enacted?
June of 2021, correct?
May of
May of
20.
Or May.
2021.
What was it before?
A mess. Well, before,
That was being
before the code said, the code before said that you took the lowest natural point, and it didn't say where, it just said the lowest natural point. So we always interpreted that to be the lowest natural point at the building footprint. Okay, so the code used to say, building height is measured from the lowest natural point to the roof mean, which is the average between the eaves, plural, and ridge. So which eave do you use? Do you use the lowest eave, or do you use the highest eave? And the code didn't say. So that's why we tried to clean it up.
Okay,
So now the code says, take that reference line, put a parallel line 35 feet above it, and you take the lowest in every case. You use the lowest of the two.
the lowest of the two.
And when they intersect like this,
Then you take the next.
then you take the lowest of the two. So from the intersection point, you use this one because it's the lowest. And then on the other side of the intersection point, you use the finish because it's the lowest.
So in this case, if you took the finished line, the dotted line,
Everything's fine.
it's all fine. But that's not what the code requires. And if you took the green line, which is another finished line, right? Am I
Mhm.
understanding it?
That's correct.
Then you've got not much.
And we can just kind of hit that off.
Right, I mean, you do
It's
it,
very manageable, I mean.
you call that a Dutch hip, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do a Dutch hip that would just take that corner off and make it compliant.
Now, if they make the adjustment in the roof that looks here that's over the second car, the two-car garage, and not over the ADU, does it solve the problem?
With to the green line, yes. This is the roof of the ADU. It goes, this is a straight line from that ridge to that shed roof. So that's the ADU roof right there.
Yeah, if that had been the solution, Judy, that's what we attempted to do, but because it's from the lower and it's from the blue on the back there, that's where it takes off so much of the roof that you either have to sink the home way down in the ground, risk flooding, have steeper driveways, all those aspects to maintain. Or if we maintain it where we're at right now, which is already like Corbett said, 11 feet to our main level below the street line, we've already sunk it down way deep, and to go any deeper would not be prudent.
Well,
Can you pull your roof down?
Which we have tried, but if we pull it down anymore, that eliminates the ADU entirely.
Because really the only section of the roof that's affected for the most part is over the ADU, because there's that 18-foot slope, and that happens to be on that north side, which is 18 feet lower than the south side. So if our lot even didn't slope that 18 feet, it would be fine. That's where it's tricky. But our architect has tried everything.
So are you saying that the slope comes not only from, sorry, I'm trying to think of the directions, from west to east,
Mm-hmm.
but it also slopes,
North to south,
South.
18
South to
feet.
North, yeah, down.
Yeah, from the south, so from the front door side, 18 feet to the garage
but
side.
isn't that true on most of your lots as well?
Now, this lot slopes 28% in the building footprint.
So
And-
18 feet total.
I mean,
from the high point.
When you compare that, the lots down at the bottom, down on the west side of town, down against 112 South, those lots are flat, especially compared to these, but those lots have a 5% slope throughout the property.
Yeah, but I'm
throughout the
talking
building.
about Summit Creek, I'm talking about Mr. Sovine's where he's got lots, and on these ridge ones, isn't that 28% consistent with what I'm seeing off of the top of the ridges?
No, because since this subdivision was approved, now our code requires that the developer do a slope analysis on his property. So this is an approved lot.
of record.
So,
Now,
when was the
approved-
subdivision approved?
You'd have to
I think it was 2016, if I recall correctly.
No, it was,
No, it's long before that, this
Like
subdivision would have been.
30-year-old houses there.
I just mean our particular plat K.
Yeah, your plat, that's what I'm talking, when your plat, when
Yes.
you platted that subdivision.
Just a minute, I'm getting it.
I think a lot of the lots have like some slope in general, but not to the excess of front to back and side to side. Like you may have some slope one way, but ours is just sloping all over the place.
Because as I drove around, it was very clear, or at least in a lot of places, that there, in fact, you know, I mean, I'm presuming that was what was the appeal, because you could have walkout basements and you could have
1993, Judy.
1993.
So when did the slope analysis come into play? Thousand Oaks?
Thousand Oaks when I did that.
So Thousand Oaks subdivision was started in 2002?
No, it was started it was started with, the Bushnells
When was
back
that?
in the late
But
1990s.
Bushnells didn't do a slope analysis. Don was the first one to do it.
Don was the first one who did that, that would have been in 2002.
So in 2002, the city passed an ordinance that required a developer to go through a slope analysis. And in that slope analysis, you had to have a certain percentage, and I don't remember what it is, of property within the building envelope that could not exceed 20%. And for the area that exceeded 20% but was less than 25%, you could only disturb a certain percentage of it. And then from 25% to 35%, you could only disturb even less.
So it was non-buildable, but it wasn't to be in the
No,
path.
anything over 35% is unbuildable, but the restrictions got tighter and tighter between 20 and 35%.
So,
Judy, just so you know, that's section 11.510 of our city ordinances, the hillside development standards.
so you're saying that currently, this lot couldn't be platted?
Correct. Well, no, it could, but you would be limited to the building envelope. The building envelope would be manipulated to stay out of those steeper slopes.
But aren't the steeper slopes the ones where they're really below this property, the building pad? Or it includes the building pad? Where that,
Well, the steeper slopes, you can have steeper slopes on the property, but once you designate the building envelope, is when those restrictions start to kick in, because you can't touch, you can't touch anything over 35%. So it can still be on your property, and it
Right.
is encompassed in private property, but between 20 and 35%, it gets really restricted as far as what you can and can't do.
okay, but if I'm understanding and if I'm saying it back to you the way I'm understanding it, you're saying that on the buildable pad, on this lot, there are now slopes that exceed, or they're at the 28% on the building pad.
No, well, I think 28% is the maximum slope within the building pad.
Is that within the building pad or the,
envelope.
okay, within the building envelope, the grade? Because it looked like from seeing it, that more of that grade was down off of,
Yeah, and we've tried to move the house throughout the lot, throughout the building envelope to try to make it, but it gets worse. So we got it in the best spot on there.
Which happens to be closest to the street.
Yeah.
You're fighting slopes, and so the further away you get from the road,
the steeper it is,
well,
right?
the harder the slope is, yes,
Yeah.
the steeper it is and the harder the slope is to deal with. Because you also have to bring into play the city code for a driveway, because the maximum driveway slope is 15%.
Well, and I understand that the objective in it, I mean, it's very clear driving around that the way people are dealing with the grades, manipulation is that they're sinking what they can, either the siding of the home or driveways or something,
Yeah, exactly.
or walkouts, they're manipulating grade and sinking that in so that it doesn't extend against that.
And trying to balance between where the driveway comes in and where the house sits.
and where the back, and the back, because your facade here will be, as you measure is there also a limit of 35 feet? A max limit as well from that, or because it's
No.
not?
Well, the 35 foot follows the house, wherever the house goes, because the measurement for the height is taken at the footprint of the building. So wherever you move that building, you deal with the slope at the perimeter of the building at that point. Does that help?
So I think what you were asking is it overall 35 feet?
No, I'm saying not overall, was there a maximum if you go from here to this point? Are we talking
No.
about 45 feet?
No,
In
because
height?
it's a parallel line.
Okay, so I'm not talking about a 45-foot variance, I'm talking about a 6-foot variance?
Or less, I mean, from what it appears to me.
Yeah, I think it's like 5'4", something like that.
Okay, so let's just say 6 for being,
6, yeah.
so that's the part that we're talking, well,
Yes.
they're saying this part, between this part and this part, which looks like, looks actually like more than half of that story, which I would guess was, so we're calling it. So that's the maximum variance, right?
That they're requesting.
Well, and it's needed for this building permit. And a smaller variance would be required for the ADU.
There would not be any variance required beyond for the ADU.
Well, it exceeds it as well.
Yeah,
Because this
anything-
other line is going
anything
down.
above the blue line,
Yeah.
it exceeds the,
Does that roof line go the whole perimeter of the back facade, the west facade?
Yeah.
So this is the whole way, so we're.
no, it's, the ADU isn't the whole width of the house.
You're right.
It's just over that garage.
It's over the second garage.
But what I'm saying is the variance that comes in this corner is affecting the whole facade of the whole length of the house.
No.
No, just the north side.
Because
That's where it's.
Let's look, okay, so
Do you
we're
mind to pull
talking,
up the floor plan elevations again? And we can kind of show you.
yeah, because as I'm looking at that, as I'm looking at this exhibit 3, which is the front facade, it appears to all be the same.
But that's the front.
That is the front, and I
It's-
understand that. So we're talking about, that's 20-something
The
probably.
second tab over there, Jody. And then if you scroll down, let's look at the elevations here. Just keep going down, and then let's hit the back here. So that's the same exhibit, so one more would take you to the back elevation, just a little bit more. Okay, there we go. So what you're asking, if I understand you correctly, Judy, is this is what it intersects. Once we get into here, we're compliant, but this roof line, the blue line is intersecting these windows. And so this is the area in violation, is this chunk.
So the way, okay, so is that correct, Mr. Corbett? So looking at this, which would be view A2-1, let's get to that. If I understand it correctly, Mr. Corbett, then you're saying that under the literal enforcement, this height from grade to up to here meets the 35.
Yeah.
And that that's true until you get where?
Right,
Because it
where
looks
that
like-
shed roof, where that roof
Right.
comes out over those second story windows.
So
Where
it's
it
for the
ends.
ADU right there.
Yeah, that's the ADU.
And even though that extension isn't, it's because of the change over there.
It's because of the natural grade.
We don't know what the natural grade was through here. Or do you?
Oh, yeah, you
Yeah,
can see on the
that's-
site. Go back.
Back to that site plan there, Jody, let's see.
Do you have the cross section? And I'm gonna mark that one 5, the one you got.
2.1. 2.1 is 5.
Yeah, 2.1 is 5.
So if you look here, or if, I don't know if you're able to zoom in or not there, Jody. So this is the reference location, existing grade being 5663. And then over here, the existing grade is 5661, so there is a 2-foot line here off of that section.
And that's what takes you up over.
Mhm.
So we're talking about that on that exhibit number 5, we're talking about kind of from the, there's a cross section there. So we're about the, well, where that roof dips.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for
Yes.
that,
the
exactly.
roof- where the roof. So, and at that point, do we know how far they're out?
No, not at that particular point.
Can
The
you
worst
tell?
the worst case is on the other end where it's 5'4".
So we're 5'4" here, so.
Yeah, I would assume we're pretty similar to that.
So we're 5'4" there and something less over the ADU.
Correct.
Jody, can you take that up just a little bit so that we can see those, no, the other way, so I can see the top corner? Now, is the area that you're talking about that you see as being the different change? You've got slope coming from east to west going down, and you're saying this part where it shifts and changes and then steeper is the problem?
Yeah, so you can see here, if you look at your existing grade here, sorry Jody, you mind to zoom in just a bit? So existing grade there is 5678. And then on the back, we're at 5661. So there's 17 feet between what's being defined in the city's code as the lowest natural grade points.
What do you figure you would have had to do, or would have to do, to literally comply?
We would have to sink the house 5 feet.
Or just the garage? That one garage?
No, we would have to sink the entire home because it's all intended for one level. And we can't access that garage off of a different slope going into our main home garage.
And you could bring the roof down, but it wouldn't, you couldn't bring,
Sorry to interrupt your thought. I think where it's a special circumstance or a hardship is in that we've got a circumstance here where we can't even fit a rambler with a normal roof structure on it.
well, I have to give you a little feedback, I mean,
Yeah, sure.
pushback, and it's not exactly a rambler when you have living space up above, up above. And when you have exposed, two full layers of walkout living space, it's not exactly a
Yeah.
rambler, so.
It's just, the only reason we feel like that is because we did build in the trusses, so there's not a roof on top of that level. So that ADU is completely 100% built in the roof trusses.
And I see that, but I mean, that's a height, that pitch of a roof is, granted, there are many that are that way, but there are many that are around in this area that are lower pitched roofs. I mean, not that they're flat, I don't mean that they're flat, but they're substantially lower.
Is the roof over the ADU, is it stick frame?
It's a combination of trusses and stick frame, so.
does having, from looking at the picture in the floor plan, it didn't look like, well, I'm not sure I remember. Cause there was something that was going interesting along the facade, in the same 5 that we were looking at, which is the rear facade. You've got it shows on the bottom here that you're ADU with windows there. But then it shows over the main block of the house, something funky going on over,
Oh, yeah, that, it's just for design.
Great room.
Yeah, that's our living room.
so you have basically a two-story family and living spaces in there, or
No.
extra tall.
It's extra tall, but it's not 2-story.
Well, that's a balcony, that's.
Oh, that's not a
the size-
balcony, that's just
That's
a window.
But that's a window on a plane, that means the ceiling is.
That's
up
what do you
here.
call it, that just sticks
The
out from the
skylight.
roof?
It's glorified skylight.
So am I wrong in making the assumption that if I were to look at that your ceiling on that,
Our ceiling, only, other than the great room, our ceiling's 10 feet high. In that great room and entry, it's taller, but the rest of the ceiling on the main floor is 10 feet high. So it's just that one area.
But the great room right now is not even in question or violation of anything right now.
no, but I'm just saying is that's,
And that's where we didn't have this extreme slope, that we would be just fine, because that area is fine. It's just the slope makes the other area not fine. But, yeah, I wouldn't say it's like super tall ceilings or anything, and it's just all within the trusses.
well, and it may be, but it has basically, you still have 30-something feet that's an exposed facade, for looking down. But if that's not how the ordinance is applied, that's,
That should be in all in compliance.
Yeah, the face of the structure, though we agree, I mean, we don't want to present a mass structure face, but what we're presenting is that whether this is here or whether it's here, it's still going to be the same presentation. By forcing us to drop it down, we're now in a drainage problem, an accessibility problem.
And it does seem, and I don't know, I mean, I don't know if you noticed when you drive around, but there are literally sandbags all over the place. So I think there's a major, and that's probably because there's not a curb and gutter, but I think there's major flooding problems up here, and we've heard that from other people. And we can't bury our basement, so where the way our lot slopes, so we just don't wanna have where our house is constantly flooding. And already having to start down 11 feet, it's already gonna be a lot of retaining and issues. We don't wanna have it sit down so far that we start having like landslides or anything like that. We just wanna make sure that we're in a safe.
but you do have a retaining wall already on the.
On the north end, yes.
Yeah, we have one, but,
But
the
that's,
bigger it gets, it's just like,
but that's not defending our property. If we sink this down, we've got a street that literally on the front of this is going right through my hand. And so we talk about how we've been so greedy with the massing here, and we should get rid of this or whatever. We haven't, we're
I haven't
just
said those
taking,
words.
no, I know, it just feels like we're, being driven into a design around an ordinance that has great intent, and we're trying to match the ordinance and meet the ordinance, but it's really not encompassing the real world scenario we're dealing with on this lot. Therefore, we view that as a special circumstance and a hardship for what we're presenting.
There could be devil's advocate position is by attempting to put the third level up there and to take the whole maximum, that's a hardship that you're creating. It isn't there as a lot, but you're choosing it, and,
Yeah, you're right, I mean, it
so
is.
we need an ADU. It needs to be separate from my house for a family member to live in. It needs to have ADA accessibility, so that's where we can do a lift going up the stairs. If we were to take that and put it in our basement, like around the back, then you have all kinds of.
yeah, but see, that's a choice, that's not.
Well, for us, it's not a choice,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, I mean, that's a design issue.
Is
Yeah.
a right of a property owner at this point.
I guess the biggest thing
It
is,
doesn't appear to be.
I think the biggest thing for us is we've tried to design around it the best that we can. So we've tried a million different ways to try to figure it out. we've had our architect draw it this way, draw it that way, and then, you know, like I said, we just start to get into flooding concerns and stuff like that, and it's like, that's a really big problem.
Now, do I take it this, on the bottom level that we're talking here, that it looks like it's very clear that that's a walkout. Below the ADU and the, garage, it also looks like there are windows, and I take it that that's some kind of space that's being.
That's just like shop space. Are you talking about those garage doors? Those are
Yeah,
garage doors.
Those are garage doors?
Yes.
And how will you access those garage doors?
We'll have to access them from right there.
From that lower level, so there will be a side.
It's just gonna, it's a wood shop, so it's not like it's gonna have cars parking in it. It's
So
just,
you'll have to have a drive.
we're gonna have like a dirt driveway that won't really ever get used, but just in case it ever does need to get it, like, access to it.
That's coming down that steep part that you're.
Yeah,
It's
but
coming up
it's
to that
probably
steep.
not gonna be like it's not gonna be like a drivable driveway. It's just a dirt road. We don't expect to have to get vehicles down there. This isn't for parking. This isn't for cars.
No, but we're talking about access is one of the things you're talking about, and so that's why I was wondering what it was and
Yeah.
how you're gonna get there, if you're gonna have a garage door and what's gonna go there.
Yeah, so the garage door is just there for convenience, for like moving big furniture in and out and stuff when it's being made, but it's not like we expect to park cars in there by any means. It's got like, water canisters for water storage, stuff like that.
Do you have that kind of a drive? That doesn't show up on the site plan, right? Or does it? Did I miss that?
No, but so, another sec is back a few more pages.
I have to admit, this was late when I was doing this, so glad to be.
So where these contour lines come across, parallel or perpendicular to, this is the
Oh, right
driveway.
there, that's the
right
drive, okay.
there. That comes down.
I missed that, thank you. Okay. Is there anything else that you wanted to offer?
The only other thing that I wanted to offer is that we have talked to the people that live around us, and in case, unless there's anything that, I don't know, any surprises, everybody that we've talked to has been in support of it and felt like it wouldn't be an issue for their property.
And that's what we call hearsay. Do you have anything signed that would,
We have one neighbor here,
okay, we'll give.
I don't know if anybody else has written
You
anything.
don't have anything signed with you though, right?
No, I guess I should have done that.
Okay.
But I would imagine they did receive a notice, I would imagine if they did have an issue, they would.
Well, that's a nice assumption, but that isn't something you can testify, other than that the notices were sent. Okay, city,
Yeah, let Mr. Slovene
Oh.
talk first. Is it Slovene, Slovene?
Either way works. Okay, I got a couple of questions and then some comments. On the first question, in your presentation, you had stated that about you making a decision. Are you the one that's making a decision or a recommendation?
I will be making a, proposed findings and a proposed order.
Okay. On the ordinance, just a quick question. Well, let me, before I get to that, let me just take a minute to say that I appreciate, and the two neighbors I've talked to appreciate the John's coming to us and talking to us about this property. That's not happened a lot around here. There's been a lot of issues, for lack of a better choice of words, because of it. And they have been very considerate of what their neighbors' thoughts are on all this, and they did incorporate that into their design. So I do want to thank them for that. That was very, very gracious of them to do that. So, but now on the grade, my question on the grade is, and my understanding of the ordinance must be something wrong with it. My understanding of the ordinance was the height of, was it 35 feet? Of the maximum height of the building was from the average point of the either final grade or natural grade, whichever is lower.
The average, you mean you would average those two?
Say that again?
So are you saying between the blue and the green line that you would average it?
Yeah, you take the center, you take the average, the center point average grade, whether, let's say it's a 20 foot, 10 foot is the average grade. Let's just use 30 foot and 40 foot, that makes the average grade 35 feet. I'm just throwing some numbers in there. And so my understanding of this, and this is where I must be wrong, is that the highest point of the building cannot be more than 35 feet from the midpoint or average point of that grade.
Okay, come and show us on the exhibit, so that we all,
Also, I might comment that a laser pointer would be about $6 on Amazon.
I've tried, it doesn't work on the TV.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. So you got high point A, low point B. I'm just gonna use it average, so average is gonna be in the middle.
between the green and the blue. Between the three lines.
Well, no, I'm not gonna eliminate, I'm just gonna use the green line as for example, okay? Or, well, natural grade is blue
Natural
line,
grade's blue
let's
line.
use that. So point A, point B, center point. You've got both axes, you're gonna have your north-south axis and east-west axis, so it's gonna be kind of canted like that. So you find that average center point of grade, and that the building envelope can't be any taller than, is it 35 feet? From the center point of that grade. Is that a correct statement? That's not a correct statement. Okay, then that's why my thinking is flawed.
Me and Mark are friends. Okay? Mark,
At the
you're-
moment.
I'll just say, Mark, you're confused.
Been there before.
Well,
It's confusing.
apparently, it's not how they do it, so.
Yeah. What I was trying to figure out.
He understands what you're talking about, how you
What-
apply it.
What I was trying to figure out is, why this point of the house, which is higher than this point of the house, is acceptable, but the lower point of the house is not. That's what I was just trying to figure out.
So I guess in a nutshell, the building height is measured parallel to that reference line. So you take the highest point and the lowest point, and then you go up 35 feet and create a parallel line.
So on the hillside, the house, the roof basically has to run downhill.
Right, and my understanding in the deliberation about creating the code, the intent was
Step it
to,
down.
to keep the homes to follow the grade.
Right.
No, I misunderstood the way the code was written then.
Yeah, you create a parallel line 35 feet above that reference line, and the house has to fit within that. So you could step the house, you could keep stepping the house, and the house could be 50 feet tall from the lowest point to the highest
As long as
point.
it follows the grade.
But as long as it follows the grade, then it
Now,
stays within the
I
intent.
misunderstood the code, but the other comment I was gonna make, there's talk about ridge lines and views and everything like that. I think, without a good topo map, it's probably hard to describe it here. A site survey would go a long ways to answer those questions that you had at the beginning of the presentation.
And you have that.
And I think they're in here.
This is a topo.
Okay. But I mean, as far as the downhill neighbors, and then, this is probably off subject for this discussion, but when we start talking about flooding and the subdivision below, what comes to me is floodplains. Do we have a floodplain map that would help some of the questions?
We do.
Okay. And
Anything else?
and then my last comment now is saying, I am very supportive of what these folks want to do. And if it helps to get an affidavit signed from us and the neighbors, I think all of us would be happy to sign it.
I appreciate that, and I didn't mean to be derogatory when you said everybody loves it, because it just isn't credible evidence in this kind of a hearing,
Yeah.
so.
Well, hopefully it's a little more credible hearing to come from us and an outside source.
It's more credible coming from an outside source.
Yeah, I guess I mean both, like not just for coming from us, but coming from him as well. Yeah,
So, there is this problem called hearsay that
yeah.
you can't testify what somebody else would say. That snags all kinds of people, so don't feel uncomfortable about that. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I don't know if Corbett or Wayne would be the best. Could you talk about the little enforcement of the ordinance on this house? I know we've talked about it a little bit, but just how you interpret it exactly.
You wanna take a stab at that?
The code
Yeah.
in it specifically?
Yeah.
Let me just use this example up here
Thank you.
too. If we talk about one of these lines, the reference line, whether it's the natural grade or whether it's a finished grade, whichever is the lowest of those lines, then wherever the highest part of the roof line is, then it's perpendicular from that location straight down to the line. Now, if the lines are crossed like this, wherever you hit the lowest of those two lines, that's the measurement too. Sometimes we talk about the measurement up, but the way our code reads is the measurement down, perpendicular from the highest roof ridge down to the particular reference line that it meets last, meaning the lowest line. So that's the way our code reads.
So in your case, this would be the blue, the line except where it goes to the dotted one.
Correct. It could be anywhere along here. This is the tallest ridge, and coming down, then it would come to the blue line, which is the lowest line, if that was where you were measuring from.
That's where you measure from.
The city does,
Yes.
yes.
I mean, it's not where, it's the little enforcement, you would apply the blue line down so that that impacts not just that far east corner, but also hits the hip on the main part of the building. Is that correct?
Say that again, please.
You know, isn't this wonderful why you have that picture? Okay, so that if you, as you're looking at the top line of the structure, from your application of what you say, you follow the lowest line along here, which would be the blue line, starting from the road, coming out to the blue line here, correct?
Yes.
That 35 feet up there makes, to authorize this, you would be have to be granting a variance through that entire space from the dotted line to the, or from the existing height of the building to the blue line. So it would be 2 or 3 feet to 6-ish.
Yes.
And so that's all the area that would be in violation.
All of that is
Correct.
a variant
Okay.
from wherever that hip is.
Where the blue line is, right?
So everything above the blue
Well,
line.
Here.
from the blue line, yeah.
Yes, down.
So it's not just this garage, it's on the main, it's on the ADU and the original house, the big house as well.
Correct, yes. And we are aware of that by the illustration.
Does that answer your question for me?
Okay, is there anything else in terms of little enforcement? So is there a way that you perceived or talked with him about what you could do, that they could do, that would bring them into little compliance?
Absent those things that they've talked about that they could do, but would present further problems for them,
Okay,
I
so
don't know.
did you talk with them about sinking? Is there,
Just from what they've presented here today.
and let me ask you a question, they said one of their concerns for sinking was because of the issue of concern of flooding. Has that been a problem in this area?
It can be, yes.
And does it impact the rear or does it impact the front facade of the drive,
It impacts the house,
the whole thing?
yeah.
They also talked about, could they set the garage, but that won't solve the problem then. So it's not just in the garage on the, excuse me.
Yeah, it'd be a whole different design that they would have to put into place to bring that portion down. And even bringing it down further presents further problems for them as well.
So taking it down farther into the structure, you would concur creates a problem.
Yes, additional problem, further than what they've already bringing it down.
Is there a way to bring the roof down that's non-structural?
We've had a few that's not that's non-structural. We've had a few that have lowered the pitch on a roof, but with their ADU over that potentially is a problem.
Have they tried,
If they
Mr.
try to
Johnson,
lower the pitch.
have you tried bringing down the pitch of the roof?
We have, we were originally at a 12-12 pitch, we're now at a 10-12 and lower in many cases.
Can you get it lower?
We can, that's how we were actually going to achieve the main roof, but once we realized it took away the ADU, that's when we stopped taking the roof pitch down.
Have you determined what is the lowest pitch that you could take and still keep the ADU?
What it is, because it already, it's just an 8-foot ceiling, so it can't go any lower.
Yeah, so the current design is as low as we can.
We already took it down to the lowest we possibly could.
You took it to the 10-12.
Yeah, cause if we go back to the plans, you can see that's illustrated on the roof plan, which is a little bit hard to read, but,
Can we just pull that up, the roof plan?
Maybe sheet A13.
and then that second tab
Wait a minute,
from the.
wait a minute, well, wait a minute, before you start. We're talking about the grading plan or?
But no, I'm sorry, the roof plan, so the second tab there, and if you scroll up, Jody,
Is this it?
that, sorry, right there,
Down low.
down,
So this
almost
one?
there, that one right there.
Okay, so that is A13, let's mark this as exhibit 6. So that's, okay, Mr. Branson, where the roofs, as you've reviewed the roofs, did you see any room for additionally taking down the pitch of the roof to bring it down? That could be done with or without, and accommodating the ADU.
I don't think so. I think they've probably done to the extent that they can and still keep the ADU.
Now, as I understand, the ADU is in this smaller, kind of, the connector. Can that come forward?
No, without revising, cause there again, this is the garage portion we were talking about with
Driving
the
into.
drive access.
Linear driveway.
My husband made electric plans.
I don't know, I hate them right now.
Well, I can tell you, if you were back in Pennsylvania, in the Amish, they say that, you look and see whether the barn that takes care of the equipment cars is bigger than the house. And that if it's equal, then it kind of reflects the relatively, I shouldn't say power, but the strength within the two, husband and wife, of whether the barn is bigger than the house.
No, well, then we better put more house on it.
Well,
This
that's
is no
second layer.
indication.
Yeah. Mr. Branson, do you concur with that, or could that come forward and solve that problem?
There's a lot of things that could solve the problem. Starting over with plans, so you look at the practicality of the alternatives.
I am, but also there's an obligation to mitigate and to bring it as close as to compliance as it can be. So I'm asking, have they mitigated?
I'm not a builder, so I don't feel really qualified to adequately respond to that question with the knowledge that I have. I know that they've made numerous attempts to try to address the problem as best they could, and I personally would rely upon their comments as they've been familiar with this, and if they've worked with an architect and other things to try to do the best they can, I would rely heavily on that with the information that they've presented here today.
So would you outline what you think that they have done to mitigate the issue?
Well, for one thing, they've addressed the roof pitch issue. They've lowered the house overall, which I think is a significant issue there, given the location where that house is going to be. I think those two things are considerable in the way that they've designed things. They're putting their house lower than what they initially anticipated. It puts them a little bit at risk, but not overly so, with the flooding issue and having their house lowered to the extent that they have to try to comply. So I think those two things indicate that they're doing what they can, and now they've come to the variance to make up the difference, I guess, so to speak, with their height requirement to try to meet that.
Mr. Corbett?
I would agree with Wayne. The house, I don't think you can bring the house any further forward without granting a variance to the front setback. Because the way the house sits right now, the garage, Jody, can you pull up the site plan, sheet 1 of 3? The front of the house, including the front porch, the front corners of that front garage.
Are you looking at 3 of 3, or not?
1 of 3.
Plan 1 of 3.
So this plan right here, this line right here, this dotted line right here is the building setback line. And so they've already brought the building as close to the front setback as they can to still and push this part of the second garage and the ADU, which is above this garage, back far enough to still be able to get in this garage with it being as close to that front setback as they can. They've dropped the house as far as, from an inspector's standpoint, they've lowered the house as far as they could to still be able to get any drainage that would come off the road or the neighboring property to go around the back of the house. As you see, these dotted lines here are existing contours. The solid lines are the design contours to what they've done, to make what they've done work. And so to lower the house any further would bring these contour lines in front of the house, which would put the house at greater risk as far as flooding, any flooding that came off of the street or from the neighboring property. Like it is now.
So they're channeling.
They're channeling the water around the back of the house like they are now. But to bring the house any further, any lower, would not allow them to be able to do that and would force that water into the front of the house instead of being able to take it around the back of the house without going onto the neighbor's property to try to do any kind of grading or design.
Okay. So it's not just taking is that the maximum, so they're not going to their maximum setback because they're allowing,
No,
they're channeling
they are they're as close to the front setback as they can be.
front setback, but that side back. Isn't it?
We're pushed all
Oh,
the way
you're
to that
right
side.
there though. Okay, so they're right to this side.
Yeah, the dotted line goes all the way around.
I get
So
it.
this dotted line back here, this is the setback line on the side.
So they're
so that-
using all of their buildable space from the
Well,
maximum
they've
setback.
brought it as close to this front as close to the front as they can, front and side, as they can right now, to still be able to get that drainage away from and around the structure.
And there also applies over on the other side. Keep
That's
thinking
the
on
north side.
North side. Anything else, Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I know before we talked a little bit about special circumstance of the property and the 28% grading, you believe this property is different from other properties in Woodland Hills, or how does it compare to other Woodland Hills properties?
Well, I think it's absolutely different, only because now you would have to come back in and show how you're going, I mean, you do anyways, because you have to deal with it as far as being able to build the structure. I mean, on the plan that shows the green and blue lines, the blue line being the native grade, the bottom of the footings are above that blue line, which in essence means they're airborne to what's there right now. So the first thing that has to be done anyways already is you've gotta dig out the organics, you gotta get rid of the topsoil, and you gotta bring structural fill back in, or you take those footings and foundation where it's above existing grade and you just make them taller. It all ends up being below grade, so it's not near as big of a deal, but you still have to bear that footing on good solid ground.
So-
Whether it's native
Okay.
or native with a taller foundation or structural fill to fill in the gap between native ground and bottom footings.
But they can do that by
say excavating out, they take out the topsoil and the organics, tree roots and that kind of stuff, and they bring structural fill back in.
For Mr. Branson and for Corbett, and for Mr.
Right.
Smith,
It's
Friends, friends, and
Branson, not Branson, excuse me,
That's all
I'm
right.
sorry.
He keeps coming around.
She must be
There's a,
from
there's
Missouri.
a, there's a famous city with that name, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was just making you a Branson instead of a Branson,
Yeah.
that's just
It's
easy.
been called worse.
Did I use it? One of the applications, or in the part of the request, is to say, just treat the green line, the natural green line, as the reference point, the finish line. I am more concerned, as opposed to a variance. I mean, that was the concepts that were in that application. My concern is, with that application, is that's an interpretation that, are you comfortable in applying in other permits in other places? Because that would, if that's the interpretation that's adopted, I see that having much more of a greater impact on the broader ordinance applications in the future, where a variance is only related to this particular plan.
We'd have to change our ordinance to do that, because that's not what our ordinance says. But by virtue of changing that, it is a variance, whether it's singularly applied or other situations similar come up, it's the same difference, so.
And am I correct in assuming that that would have dramatic impacts on the rest of your ordinances and the applications, if you were to adopt that interpretation?
It
I would
could.
say- Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
yes.
And we talked about the change earlier and how it was changed before, and part of that change was to clarify, so there was just that singular interpretation versus kind of various, looking at different heights of averages and whatnot.
How many, I mean, having slopes and, exposures and height is something that is common in the city. I mean, you've got walkouts all over the place, and that's that's part of your appeal, I would think. How, have you granted variances to allow this kind of thing in other places where variances where you've got a steeper slope? Because you said you've got some places where there's steeper slope, and that's why you have in fact changed your ordinance to make those places,
Harder to build on.
harder to build on.
I don't know that we've ever granted variances, but,
Not for
But-
height.
but again, the issue hasn't come up until we changed the code. Because before, this, I mean, if you look at that, if you look at this elevation, the old code took the measurement from this point right here to midpoint of that roof. And so all of this was negligible, all of this didn't matter because it was the average of the roof height. And so this house easy would have been built into the old code.
With the old code, we were gonna even be able to do a two-story home,
And you could,
and we could have, yeah, and then it changed.
You've got a two-story home.
I mean, the comparison is that, and.
I guess I'm saying a whole other floor with it, we would have had a whole second floor built, and then a roof on top of that, is what we were originally.
The comparison, we've gone through and tried to compare the new code to the old houses, or to the existing houses that were approved prior to. And I think the tallest house was 50 feet tall. Would have been considered 50 feet tall under the new code, but it was 35 feet tall under the old code. And
Because
so that's the difference that the
that's
new
the
code is
right
making.
way, okay, the new code is more restrictive.
Oh, by far.
Because as I drove around, it appeared that if it wasn't just one level, that many were just one level out. But in the newer construction, that you had more of the one level on one side and a walkout on downside slope. And that in the new construction, it was starting to step down instead of having a drop off. And so that was kind of part of my question is, how many lots have you got out that other people are going to anticipate? If a variance is granted for this, how many other situations do you see where that kind of a slope is gonna be involved, and does that give you heartburn?
I don't know about you, but I've tried to look. I mean, to me, the issue in this comes because of how fast the property drops off on the back. Well, the code, when we changed the code and required the more restrictive identification of the steeper slopes, the newer subdivisions don't deal with it near as much, because they've
You kind of identify as buildable
they've
land.
designed their development to stay away from those steeper slopes. Now, in the old part of town, the places to me where it comes into play more so are the steeper the gullies where it becomes steeper. So even higher up in town, where we call it the alluvial fan, the whole city is built on an alluvial fan.
Okay.
You get way out in the valley, and you look up and you see the gullies on the mountain, and that's what, the dirt that used to be up there, or the material that used to be up there is what's created the city down here. And so,
It's called foothills.
yeah.
Compton
But-
Heights and Holiday
But
on.
building on the alluvial fan, the issues higher up on the alluvial fan aren't near as drastic as they are when you get down lower, because down lower on the fan
You've got gullies.
is where the gullies start to carve, start to form. And we don't have as many, the lots are bigger because of the gullies, and it's harder to get a buildable area in really steep property, and so the lots are bigger. They're in the older part of town, so they're 2-acre lots for the most part, unless they've been subdivided or, that kind of stuff. And so I don't see that there's near as many unbuilt lots that have these kind of issues left as compared to, again, the newer lots and the newer subdivisions are more restricted as far as the building envelopes and the issues that are created by this.
And how would you tell someone coming in a new lot that they shouldn't have a variance so that it isn't restricted because the old ones get to build on the steep slopes?
Well, this guy's got a 28% slope across his property, and you've only got a 10% or 8% or whatever. I mean,
No, just.
I understand. I mean, a defensible position, you make a decision as long as you can defend that position with anybody else. To me, this is unique. I don't know how else to.
I'm gonna have to run. Can I say one more thing on behalf of the applicant, and then I've got to go? The applicants bought their property, what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
About 3 years ago.
And when they bought their property, the code was significantly different than it is today, as Corbett has just explained. So, looking at it from their position, we bought with one expectation 2 years ago, and now we're having to deal with another expectation. And we're doing everything in our power to fit both those expectations together. I just want to say that on behalf of the applicants, and I've got to run. So,
Thank you.
you bet, thank you guys.
And that issue is, there is a legal application of that issue called vesting, but it takes a permit and digging soil usually to get there. Mr. Branson?
We do have a number of issues, building height in looking at site plans. Their situation is unique to their own circumstances, but quite frequently, we have issues with building heights where the site plans don't meet the requirement for a building height. No ordinance is perfect. We changed to this one because of problems that we had with the older one. There may be, as we continue to have problems with meeting our height requirements, there may be a need to look at our building height ordinance again and modify it and change it. No ordinance is perfect. So this isn't, most of the time people are able to deal with it, but they make considerable changes oftentimes to their site plans, and their lot is conducive to some of those those changes that they're making. Other places, like Corbett mentioned, down further to the north and on the west, the lots are entirely different than they are up here.
And obviously, you wouldn't have the option for variance if someone didn't understand that things on the ground are different, can be different. So my question is, bottom line, if you were having to see whether it was reasonable or unreasonable, you will have to live with whatever's decided. And so are you willing, I'm not willing to say that green line ought to be the way it's interpreted, because I think that will have dramatic impacts as you review all the rest of your plans. So, I'm not gonna grant you that, being interpretation, because it opens up all of your review plans from then on. If someone's smart enough to contest you and say, wait a minute, you've got an interpretation holding that.
You let them do it.
Um,
You let them do it, now you have to let me do it,
Oh, absolutely.
kind of thing.
And the question is coming is, okay, in terms of, so from that standpoint, that portion of the application request is, I'm not going to approve. Because I think that interpretation has long and far-reaching and broad applications, far beyond your property, however unique or non-unique it may be. But that's different, that's not the same concept as a variance, but the same question is, if you grant a variance here, if a person can come in that has unusual, unique circumstances that you're saying is the steep slope, is that make it appropriate for a variance? And what I'm getting from Mr. Branson and Corbett is that you're saying, first of all, the difference would be is that if someone were bringing in that land in a newer subdivision, it would already be marked as unbuildable. And so it shouldn't be showing up.
Well, it wouldn't be marked as unbuildable, but the restrictions would be considerably tighter to be able to incorporate that 28% slope. Anything over 20, well, it goes from 20 to 25, and then 25 to 30.
So if this were on a new lot, in a new subdivision, you wouldn't be saying this was unique?
No,
Because that would be,
we would have already dealt with it.
we've already dealt with it.
And as I said, that's ordinance 11.5.10.
And what, do you mind,
Hillside.
can we read that? Hillside site development, any subdivision containing a hillside area, any areas within the subdivision with slopes steeper than 25% shall comply with the provisions of 11.5.10. 11.5.10B, no grading shall take place on a hillside area until a grading plan has been submitted and approved by the city engineer. C, any area within a subdivision which has a slope greater than 35% with a slope of 35% or greater shall remain ungraded. Any area within a subdivision which has a percent slope between 20 and 34% may be graded, provided, however, the grading area shall be less than 1/2 of the area of such slope. And to me, that's the biggest caveat. So in this portion right here, the entire building pad is 28%. And so if you couldn't even touch, what's that percentage? 50%. But you can't touch, you have to leave a percentage of that area that's between 20 and 34, you can only grade 50% of that area. Well, the entire building envelope is 28%. And so we've already said, you can put your house right here. And then this code, which was done after that was approved, says, no, you can only touch half of that.
So
You can't build in what you bought as a building envelope, you can't build your house there, anywhere in that building envelope.
So it would make the buildable lot unbuildable.
Do you dare say that?
No, I'm saying,
I agree, but I hesitate to say that because that's a takings by restriction.
no, but that applies to the new one. You're saying that under the new applications, the new statute, or the new ordinance, that slopes of this size would not be within a building permit, or would be treated differently, and that taking those ordinances and applying them to this ground
Correct.
on an already approved lot that was approved with different standards
Correct.
would not allow a home to be built on the buildable lot that was approved by the city.
Correct.
Any other questions?
The one question I just have, kind of what Wayne talked about before, is it your understanding, so we know the literal enforcement of the ordinance doesn't comply, but do you believe due to the slopes of the spirit of the ordinance still complies with what they've presented?
Say that again.
So, the literal enforcement of the ordinance, this is too high, but do you believe kind of the spirit of what you're trying to do? Wayne helped, for background, Wayne helped write this ordinance, he was really instrumental with the planning commission in passing this ordinance and taking it to the city council. So you believe this still meets the spirit of the ordinance?
We didn't go back and look at existing lots to see whether that ordinance would fit with somebody putting houses on existing lots. It was designed to move forward with the city. So in that respect, that causes some of the issues that we have, because we're still issuing building permits on old lots here in this city. And
You will be for a long time.
yeah,
I think what Mr. Smith was saying is, the question is, what would you describe as the main objectives of your new ordinance that this is running afoul of?
the main objective was to clarify our old ordinance that left ambiguity in it, and to try to incorporate the general topography of the city into that new ordinance.
But was that to discourage grading and disturbance of steep slopes?
Not the building height ordinance, didn't have anything to do, but it required the subdivider, when a subdivider comes in now, he has to comply with that grading ordinance. He can't put a lot out there that's a non-buildable lot, so to speak, as he designs a subdivision. That's a restriction on him. But our goal with the new ordinance was to clarify the ambiguity in the old one, and to structure it in a way that, again, there's a lot of places in the city that you can't build a lot on, and that becomes open space for the city or for the developer. But for the bulk of the area in the city, would hope that ordinance would accommodate the home building on particular lots.
So do you think that this permit, even though it does not technically meet the requirement because of the additional 5 feet in the height of the roof, that wasn't previously the line, where you measure to? Under the old ordinance, as I understand it, this would meet those requirements.
It likely would,
It could
yeah.
probably be another 10 feet tall under the old ordinance.
So if the point was then are you comfortable with a finding that would say or suggest that that allowing a variance there still does not do damage to the overall objectives of the ordinances that are involved with? That it's not encouraging excessive height, and that the height would be allowed but for the unusual slope that is in the buildable lot that would otherwise be addressed differently if it were new?
I would say absolutely.
Can I bring up an example?
Sure.
Jody, would you bring up lot 1 of Bell? The recorded plat for lot number 1?
What county?
Yeah, the recorded plat from the county for lot 1 of the Bell subdivision, phase A.
Would you agree as well, Wayne?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Would you agree with Corbett's analysis
Yes.
as well? Okay.
So this lot right here,
Lot number 1, you see how narrow that lot
this next lot right down here. And so this lot is where that gully comes, the first gully comes through that ends up on their property.
So the dip, that we've talked about the dip.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, this lot, because it had to stay away from the gully and it had to, and the buildable area could not include slopes that were too steep, this buildable area is super narrow. That's the result, this is the result of subdividing under the current code. Where the existing code let you include slopes greater than 20%, greater than 30%. For now, you can't do that.
The last question I had, and I may or wonder, you might wanna ask if you have anything as well, same with Wayne and Corbett, is when I looked through the general plan, I didn't see anything that really, this affected it in any way. Did you see anything in the general plan, or kinda just significantly affects the residents of Woodland Hill if this was approved?
Well, to me, I think it comes also back to the point that you were making, Judy, about sort of the general layout of the city. And it seems to me that, you know, the height restrictions would really be tailored toward obstructing views, impairing views. This does not seem to be an issue there, so I don't have any concerns with respect to the general plan or to the height, that I believe is the spirit of the underlying ordinance generally.
Okay. Wayne and Corbett, do you have anything else to add?
No, I agree with that comment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Alright, that is all I have, Judy.
Okay. I changed my mind, frankly, with this discussion. And I'm going to grant the variance. Finding, first of all, that the variance is limited to that portion of the roof as it exceeds the average line that we talked about.
Blue line. The blue one.
Yes, above the blue line. So I'm not accepting your green line theory. That sounds kind of fun, but, cause I think that interpretation just does damage to the general plan and future applications. In this particular case, the variance seems to be a function of an unusual circumstance of a very steep grading that if I permit, that would be treated differently under new ordinances or under the existing ordinance than it was in the ordinance that you built on. And not that I believe that you are vested and entitled to go forward with that, but it sounds as though that the little enforcement, is not necessary to carry out the general purposes that are trying to be achieved. And that you have done some things in terms of mitigating the plan, and if you can do anything further to encourage that, I would, but when I've asked you about the ones that appeared obvious, you had already had taken those into effect and reasons why you weren't doing it. I think that there's a significant concern that literal enforcement would substantially impact the type of buildable lot or buildable pad that you would be able to develop on. And while I'm not sure that you always get to do a two-story house wherever you are, because I don't think that's what's contemplated, but with the slope coming across on a buildable pad that otherwise wouldn't be permitted, that creates different kinds of problems. So it's, I know that sounds perhaps like a distinction without a difference, but in my mind, it is. And no one has identified further actions that could be required to bring you more into compliance than what you've already talked about. And that you're already taking actions to attempt to deal with offsetting problems, that if you solve that problem, you create other problems that create substantial risk to property owners, not only your own property, but downhill property, with the drainage issues that apparently are very real. And so I'm going to grant that ordinance. Are there any questions about that from staff or from
think you misspoke, you said you're going to grant that ordinance,
Grant that
grant
variance.
the variance.
Yes. You're right, I probably misspoke a lot, I hope you understand that. That's good. Council, do you have questions?
I do not.
So that's where we'll go forward. In terms of the record, this should be your exhibit list. I have marked it up. Jody, that'll go there. I have my own copies that we did not introduce all of the, all of it into it, but so that we can refer on those. And I will draft that. Do you want me to submit it to the mayor? Do you want me to submit it to council for review as you would normally a proposed order?
Yeah, I think I should approve it as to form, so if you'll email it to me.
Okay, if you got a card, just let me know that. Generally speaking, in the other cities where I've acted as a hearing officer, I generally will submit it to council for review, and I would send it to opposing parties, so I would send you a copy as well, so that if you, you can review it, and if you think that I have made errors or, misspoke or misspeak in the future, you have an opportunity, you can call me. If you have objections, you think it's really bad, then you have to appeal it. And the ordinance will give you those kinds of requirements about it. Are there any other questions that either the mayor or the council want me to go with?
None for me,
No,
thank you.
yeah.
So that you know, I will take a crack at it, but I happen to be leaving for a week, as I indicated to the mayor when we talked about setting this time frame, is that I am gone for a week, and I'm not gonna take it with me. So, if I get a draft to you before, I will, but it may not be.
Okay,
It may
that's
be.
fine.
Okay. Questions?
Where are you headed?
I'm going to Hawaii.
Oh, man.
Oh, don't tell Jody that.
I have a daughter and grandchildren that have gone there, and so I not only get to go play, I get to go play with people I love. I'm gonna do it. So anyway, if that works.
Yeah,
Now,
that works for me.
is there anything are you in a time frame on, and I don't know what you do, I know that Holiday records them, I don't know if you record them or if you just put them with your building permit, or how you internally function with that.
What's the standard that you
We'll,
usually
we'll
do?
put it with the document file for the building permit, so
Okay,
that
so I'm
everything's together.
I'm not worried about legal descriptions, but I probably do need a tax parcel number. If you could get me that,
Yeah.
cause I don't remember seeing that on any of the,
This is the stuff that Jody showed us, that kind of on their digital stuff.
But I can go ahead and send that to you, Judy, that's okay.
It's also on the site map if you.
yes. Okay, I didn't go looking for it last night, so we're with that. People pointed out and tell me, I'm not seeing a tax parcel number. I usually just do a format that has the address. Oh, wait a minute, is that here?
48145.
48-145,
-0001.
3 zeros and a 1.
Yes,
And I'm assuming that's a county tax parcel?
yes.
So I'll put that up in the, kind of block caption, if that's okay. Any other questions? We haven't done this before, so we're
Yeah.
kind of figuring out the administrative part of it as well.
And it looks like
Legal description, one legal description.
Is it easy?
Is lot 1, Oak Ridge, plat K. Oak Ridge subdivision, plat K.
that is very easy.
Okay.
Yes.
And then it looks like for you, Steve, that you put stevejohns80@gmail.com. Is that the best email?
That is, yeah.
That's on the application, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So I'll copy that to the Johns, and I'll copy that to Mr. Smith. Are we okay for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope it wasn't too painful. Actually, it changed my mind. I didn't come prepared, from what I read when I came, I thought I would be reaching a different answer. So,
Well, thanks for considering it, looking at all the angles for us.
well, that's what a hearing is about, is for
Yeah.
everybody to bring forward the information.
Yep.
So, okay.
Okay, thank you.